the person who was at the front door. And he was standing there, and I don't think he was the main person. I think he was the guy outside who was waiting for them to come out.
The patio layout, the planners, her solo living situation, her daily routine, he had memorized everything. He identified every dark corner the cameras missed and understood the kind of woman Nancy Guthrie was. He banked on her being caught off guard, having done the prep work and planning a solid return. A random stranger doesn't know those details. You don't pick that up just by cruising the block once at night. Nobody walks onto a fresh property already knowing exactly how the backyard gate hinges open. Staying off camera requires having stood in that exact spot before to map out the lens's reach. You cannot pick the weak entry point without having already tested the ones that are bolted shut. Mastering a layout like that takes time scouting it under the sun and after the lights go out. You have to have walked the property line, eyeing those patio entrances and deciding right then that is the one. He must have had a perfectly boring excuse to be there, something that let him blend into the scenery. Looking completely ordinary is the mystery at the heart of this entire investigation. Her family loses sleep over more than just the identity of the person who snatched Nancy Guthrie. 2 months of federal work, a $1,200,000 bounty, and K-9 sweeps through the Tucson desert. The who matters, but the how is chilling. How did he get so familiar with her home? He might not have known her name, but he knew her rhythms, her space, and her vulnerabilities. 60 days in, investigators finally have a solid lead on where this case is heading. We are not talking about handcuffs yet, but rather a hyper-focused path the feds are now sprinting down. Both the Bureau and the Pima County Sheriff are throwing every bit of manpower at this specific angle. If we follow this trail to its logical end, and we will, the destination is truly haunting. What is waiting at the finish line should make everyone following this story take a heavy pause. The feds might have actually looked the kidnapper right in the eye at one point. And they likely let him slip away. Think back to the entrance, the plants, and that gate. Let's rewind to January 31st, 2026, where the crime scene tells a very specific story. Whoever targeted Nancy Guthrie did not just stumble inside by some stroke of luck. This was not some random crime of opportunity or a guy noticing an open door while passing by. This was a calculated infiltration that required an inside level of familiarity with a private residence. Her daughter Savannah broke her silence on the Today Show during an emotional sit-down with Hoda Kotb. Savannah mentioned the rear entrances were found wide open when the police arrived. There were no smashed windows or kicked-in frames like you would see in a typical burglary. The doors were held open on purpose, a detail that immediately felt completely wrong. At first, we thought maybe paramedics had carried her out on a gurney through the back. Someone had wedged an object in the door frames to keep the path clear. Journalist Ashley Banfield has been digging deeper into these leads than anyone else on the beat. Police sources told her the intruder used Nancy's own planters to keep the doors and gate open. The person responsible specifically used her own garden decor as tools for the crime.
Was that the perpetrator used Nancy's flower pots to do this. He took her beautiful flower pots that I can only imagine she spent time nurturing and making beautiful for her back patio, and he used them for his evil fucking plot.
He took the very plants she had likely spent years caring for and made them part of his plan. He weaponized the beauty she created on her patio for a truly sinister purpose. Everything was staged so he could move her off the property without any friction. Keeping several exits open is not a split-second panic move. It is a calculated strategy. You prop a door when you need to move fast and keep your hands ready for a struggle. You do it because you are coming back and you cannot afford to get locked out. He knew which doors to hit because he had already scoped out the entire floor plan. He picked the specific exits that provided the fastest straight shot to the back gate. Per several insiders within the police force, multiple outdoor lights and surveillance units were cut before she was taken. That's a huge red flag. The perpetrator knew exactly where those lenses were hiding. Take those motion lights near the rear entrance, the one leading toward the storage area or garage, for example.
those spotlights dangling by the other back door that goes into the garage or to a storage room. We're not sure what's inside that door, but it's not necessarily the house. Maybe he took those lights out 2 weeks early, knowing I'm coming this way.
While I'm unsure what's behind that door, it doesn't seem to lead into the main house. Perhaps he sabotaged those fixtures 14 days in advance, scouting his path. You don't just stumble upon their exact mounting points. To neutralize them without getting caught on tape, you'd need a very specific calculated blind spot approach. This implies he'd already stood in that yard sizing things up. He studied the angles from the perspective of an intruder. He drafted a blueprint just to bypass those cameras, but there's one specific clue that truly reveals the nature of this predator. A camera near her front door caught a glimpse of a hidden figure with a pack during the incident. That face covering is vital because it signals two distinct facts at once. Mainly, it proves he knew the recording systems were active and could identify him if he wasn't careful. He arrived ready for high-tech eyes. Furthermore, he didn't hide his features because he was some random drifter afraid of a new town. No, he did it because he suspected that if anyone saw him, someone would recognize him instantly. A visible face would have bridged the gap between the crime and his true identity. Investigators confirm biological traces on the front porch. When you combine that with the jammed doors and sabotaged tech, a chilling narrative emerges. Nothing was messy. It was surgical. This individual had mentally rehearsed every second of that evening, taking every precaution to ensure things went exactly as intended. Such meticulous planning demands insider info, intimate any details of the layout that you only get from being there. You don't get that familiar with a place from a distance. Consequently, the core mystery haunting this case since day one, way before the media briefings began or the local sheriff addressed the public. Long before the bounty was announced, the real question was who actually belonged at Nancy Guthrie's place, not just some passerby, but someone who frequented the property or worked nearby without raising any eyebrows or causing a stir. Federal agents are now tackling that exact mystery with full force, focusing heavily on what happened on January 11th and 24th. Some of the most revealing insights into the investigation's mechanics come from Brian Enton's recent reports on News Nation. Enton has been embedded in Tucson lately. He's been interviewing locals and has remained a rock-solid, fact-based journalist throughout this ordeal, avoiding the usual clickbait and gossip. The details he's uncovered regarding the Bureau's specific window of interest are absolutely critical. Sources tell Enton that detectives are zeroing in on two specific calendar days, January 11th and January 24th. They've been questioning people about any unusual sightings on those dates, particularly starting with January 11th. I've mentioned that date previously based on neighbor accounts, but now January 24th, just 8 days before her disappearance, is also under the microscope. Both dates preceded the January 31st incident, and what's even more telling is that they both landed on weekends. We're being just as cautious with our wording here as Enton was during his broadcast. To put it simply, he hasn't confirmed exactly what evidence the feds pulled from the 24th, though they reviewed footage. While their exact targets remained classified, locals were left with no doubt that those two specific dates were the focus. However, the working hypothesis he presented, which to be clear is still unverified, is quite compelling. The theory suggests the perpetrator holds a standard 9 to 5 during the week, only using their free time on Saturdays and Sundays to scout. He likely traded his professional attire or work vehicle for something much less conspicuous to blend into the suburbs. He probably aimed to look like just another local taking a weekend stroll, someone who wouldn't stand out on a quiet afternoon. Local Laura Gargano, she's been cooperating with the press and the police, noting that agents seem particularly fascinated by her movements on January 24th. Based on what she saw, she's convinced this wasn't a solo act. There might have been a second pair involved. She recalled seeing someone lingering by the entrance, but her gut told her he was just a bit player in a larger scheme. She suspects he was merely the lookout, waiting for someone already inside the house to emerge with the victim. Duo separate assigned roles. That kind of teamwork adds a whole new layer of sophistication to this already baffling federal case. Local resident Aldine Meister described how federal agents thoroughly scoured the entire block. Officers hit every doorstep grilling people about specific dates and any out-of-place cars. They inquired about maintenance crews focusing their investigation on January 11th specifically.
Questions were pretty normal. They did ask me about January 11th. And that was about the time I saw the strange guy. So that all kind of connected with me.
What was the date? Do you know the date you saw the strange guy?
You know, it was around the 10th, 11th, or 12th.
That resonated with me because I spotted a sketchy individual around then. Which day? Likely somewhere between the 10th and the 12th of the month. Conducting a search this deep weeks later indicates a highly targeted operation. Chasing a lead from those 2 weekends reveals a very telling pattern. January 11th was 3 weeks prior. The 24th was 7 days out. If the Bureau is zeroing in on those Saturdays, they have solid evidence. A signal hit or perhaps a digital trail. A face on a security app likely placed a suspect near Nancy Street. Detectives do not revisit old dates unless they have proof as an anchor. Significant activity occurred near the property on January 11th. Another event took place near that same residence on January 24th. Authorities suspect the same person returned later, implying he was casing the home. His presence on those earlier dates allowed him to study her daily routine. He monitored her lights and learned when the street finally went silent. He likely examined the rear glass doors to figure out the locks. He mapped camera angles and noted those heavy planners could prop doors. 3 weeks of scouting, then the final act. What brought him there? What was his cover? How did he linger there without being flagged? Agents are now grinding to find that answer. Was it work-related, a professional task, a job sanctioned by a neighbor or firm? Day 60 provided the break. On April 1st, 2026, the contractor lead finally blew open. Ashley Banfield released a crucial report regarding this specific case development. Sources say the FBI is now vetting every single builder in sight. Every independent subcontractor, even day laborers near the Catalina Foothills, are currently under the microscope. The scale is massive, involving much more than just licensed crews. It goes beyond companies with official trucks and business permits. Every temporary worker hired for a week is being scrutinized. Anyone near her home who unloaded gear and then vanished is being identified. Each individual worker, a source labeled the tracking process a disaster, which makes total sense. Auditing every person who worked in those foothills is a monumental chore, especially during the months leading up to January 31st, 2026. Consider the massive breadth: pool crews, gardeners, painters, and HVAC teams prepping for the desert heat. Plumbers, window washers, and pest control experts roaming the neighborhood. Gig app handyman renovation teams and electricians working in separate areas. Everyone had a valid excuse to be there, so no one noticed. Then there is the additional layer of complexity flagged by the source. A geographic hurdle that makes this entire investigation significantly more difficult. Tucson is a border city located just an hour from the international boundary. This local casual labor scene isn't exactly known for background checks or official tax forms and social security numbers. A good portion of these workers gained access to local job sites simply because a relative mentioned a quick 2-day gig was available nearby. They were compensated in greenbacks and frequently used aliases instead of their legal names. No payroll records or tax documents exist to track them, but that's just a logistical fact, not a political stance. It highlights the uphill battle investigators face in this specific region and validates the terminology used by Banfield's contact. The situation is chaotic because the paper trail is fractured into dozens of dead ends that lead nowhere. Local deputies informed Fox News Digital that they have been conducting intense door-to-door sweeps throughout NY's neighborhood, visiting every single residence to grill neighbors about any laborers they might have noticed lately, including any memorable trucks or random maintenance work performed on their land over the past few months. While federal agents analyze footage from 3 security feeds at NY's residence, Sheriff Nanos confirmed the K-9 units are currently on standby. He noted they are still available if necessary, though the tactical focus of the search has since evolved. This probe has transitioned into a new chapter, and the entire command center has physically moved locations. Sergeant Aaron Cross, who heads the Pima County Deputies Organization, informed Ashley Banfield that the Guthrie Task Force has teamed up with federal agents at their Tucson headquarters. Not that anything has been visible to the public from the outside. Once this joint team moved into the federal building in Tucson, the flow of information became even more tightly restricted. And honestly, they were already doing an impressive job of keeping things quiet before the move. Having federal and local detectives working side by side in a high-security facility signals a massive shift in the case's momentum. This isn't just a local search with federal oversight. It's a fully merged operation driven by federal power, and the Bureau possesses the high-tech tools, vast resources, and multi-agency reach to map out contractor networks that a local sheriff's office just can't reach. We know of 5 local detectives plus a sergeant, but the total number of federal agents involved remains classified. That was exactly what I wanted to ask next. How much federal muscle is actually still on the clock? It's hard to get a straight answer, as even Sergeant Cross didn't have a specific head count during his talk with Banfield. He was very candid about the current status, calling this the grind phase where every small detail matters. Most cases wrap up fast because criminals are usually sloppy, but this one shows signs of careful, calculated planning. Because of that level of preparation, it was never going to be an easy or quick win for law enforcement. That doesn't mean they've hit a wall. It means they are being meticulous because the person they're after was cautious. They are slowly weaving a net and tightening the strands every week until the suspect has no room left to breathe. Between the reward and the constant media presence, the Guthrie family is refusing to let the trail go cold. They went public on March 21st, the 50th day since NY went missing, to plead for the community's help. Their message was precise. They want specific memories from anyone who was near that neighborhood back in January. They are looking for anything unusual from those particular weekend timeframes, even if it seemed insignificant back then, to help the family put up a $1 million reward. Combined with other incentives, the total bounty is roughly $1.2 million, a figure that talks. For a day laborer who might have seen a suspicious vehicle or heard someone bragging, that amount of money represents a complete transformation of their entire life. Investigators are essentially betting that such a life-changing payout will eventually break someone's silence. During her Today Show appearance, Savannah Guthrie spoke for the first time, saying her family is still nurturing a flickering flame of hope. Those aren't the sentiments of people who are ready to walk away or give up the fight. They are waiting for the exact moment this massive search finally corners the person responsible despite all the outside noise. You've likely seen the early rumors that attempted to link the situation to NY's son-in-law, Toamaso Chioni. Ashley Banfield leaned heavily into that theory, citing what she called a flawless source within the investigation. But local authorities pushed back hard, and the Guthrie family reportedly considered taking the matter to court. Megyn Kelly noted on her show that Savannah is absolutely fuming and the family doesn't think Sion is involved. The local sheriff's department hasn't officially named a person of interest. Since no one is facing charges, we won't guess about individuals. Instead, we are tracking exactly what the detectives are doing. Now at day 60, investigators are vetting the labor crews, which brings us to the story of the other Nancy. Another woman named Nancy also vanished from her residence. She lived solo and was a pillar of her local neighborhood. She disappeared under mysterious circumstances that offered zero clear leads during those first few days of the search. Her case finally broke open thanks to a contractor who had a perfectly valid reason to be on her land. This individual was talking with detectives before they ever realized he was the culprit. Her name was Nancy Woodrum, 62. She resided in Paso Robles, California, on a Victorian ranch estate she affectionately called Paradise Ranch. That title fit her perfectly. She owned a local salon, was a grandmother, and a very dedicated Jehovah's Witness. Friends say she was the heart of her circle, someone who made every person she met feel truly valued and seen. On the night of May 5th, 2018, she suddenly went missing right out of her own bedroom. The scene contained a disturbing mixture of two distinct profiles, Nancy's and that of an unidentified male. This combined sample created a major technical hurdle for the lab, stalling the entire investigation for several months. Because it was a tangled blend of genetic material rather than one clean strand, it couldn't go into CODIS. That is the National Criminal Database used by law enforcement to hunt for matches against known offenders. So the team had the male's DNA profile and physical evidence. They held a partial biological blueprint of the intruder, yet they couldn't use the usual channels to track him down. Their only option was to start vetting every person who had been near her property before she was taken. Regarding this specific investigation, detectives focused on the hired help contractors and laborers she had brought in to perform work on her home. She was prepping Paradise Ranch for the market, so various workers were rotating through in the weeks before her disappearance. Multiple crews and different contractors had a total green light to move around the house and the surrounding terrain. One of those workers on the list was a man named Carlo Alberto Fuentes Flores. He was a house painter hired to stain the deck just weeks before Nancy vanished from her ranch. He'd been all over the property and knew the floor plan from working on it with his hands. He navigated that land in a way that gave him an intimate understanding you simply can't get from the street. Early in the hunt, the lead investigator on the case, Clint Cole of the local sheriff's office, contacted Fuentes Flores as a potential witness, not as a suspect. Detective Cole reached out by telephone just to see if the worker had noticed anything out of the ordinary. Fuentes Flores picked up and gave his answers. He played the cooperative citizen role perfectly, and since he wasn't a target yet, he simply went back to his life. The investigation moved forward without him at the center as the team chased down other potential leads. Various persons of interest were cleared, and the case hit that exhausting slow burn phase we're seeing in the current mystery. Months ticked away while that DNA profile sat in a lab with no hit. Then the sheriff's office tried a high-tech strategy that had almost never been used in a California criminal case. They filed for a Google geofence warrant. This asks Google to identify every device tied to their digital ecosystem that was located within a specific area at a specific time. Cops mapped out the boundaries around Paradise Ranch to see which phones were lurking there the night Nancy vanished. The data came back showing 2 devices pinging right inside her studio at 1:15 and 1:30 in the morning. One trail led to Carlo. It was Fuentes Flores, the same painter who had already spoken to the lead detective as a witness. The same man who took the call told his story and was allowed to walk away months earlier. Now digital data placed him directly inside the home at the very moment the tragedy occurred. Investigators shadowed him to a restaurant and snatched a soda bottle he handled to finally secure his DNA sample. Authorities cross-referenced that genetic profile with the biological evidence gathered from Nancy Woodrum's private quarters. It was a perfect match. They took Fuentes Flores into custody in December 2018, over 7 months after Nancy vanished. While being questioned, he eventually guided the team to her body in a secluded spot near Highway 58 in a rural stretch of the county. He admitted his guilt at trial. He was found guilty of a fatal assault involving a heinous crime and handed a life term. He is currently serving his sentence without parole. Nancy finally received justice, though it took 7 long months to arrive. The breakthrough required technology that was brand new to the field and revisiting a man who was initially just a background figure. This was an individual who had already provided statements and been documented by the team. He had been cleared to leave, but eventually the lab data linked him to the scene where it had been waiting the entire time. That provided a massive takeaway for Clint Cole, the veteran investigator who led the San Luis Obispo Sheriff's team. You might recognize his name from his work on the high-profile Kristen Smart investigation. That student's disappearance in 1996 went cold for over 26 years until Cole's persistence and genetic genealogy finally solved it. Cole is not the type of person who seeks out media attention or fame. He isn't some talking head. He's a dedicated professional who speaks because these stories still carry significant weight. He believes that finding closure for those who were taken is what truly matters in this job. There are specific insights a seasoned pro has about how these investigations work that deserve to be documented. When Ashley Banfield invited Cole onto her show to analyze the Nancy Guthrie mystery, it was a deliberate choice. The similarities between the two victims, both living solo, were striking and impossible for anyone to ignore. To be honest, that investigation involved a large number of independent contractors working on the site. The Woodrum estate was quite large. Both women were taken at night, leaving behind scenes suggesting the perpetrator was familiar with the layout. So it's incredibly common to cross paths with your primary suspect early in an investigation before they are even officially flagged. That is exactly what happened when I first reached out to Carlo the painter on the project. Cole has become a vital authority, connecting the events in Paso Robles from 2018 to the current Tucson investigation in 2026. Cole understands a specific reality about cases involving many laborers that most casual observers simply miss. When your suspect pool is full of people with authorized access, like contractors or hired help, the job becomes much more difficult. The difficulty isn't just naming them. You can easily track them through official records, building permits, or local interviews. You can ask neighbors about who was working on which house during those specific months. The real obstacle is the volume. You have to rule out dozens of people before you can use specialized surveillance tools. This includes things like digital tracking or covert evidence gathering. Cole reflected on the Woodrum search during a recent interview with the local Paso Robles press. His very first talk with Carlo Fuentes Flores was actually just a simple phone call. He contacted the painter early on, not because the man was under suspicion, but as part of a general sweep. Every worker who had been on that property was on the list, and the painter was just another name to check. Cole called, the man answered, and they moved on for months until digital tracking data completely flipped the script. Cole's thoughts on that initial phone conversation have stuck with the investigators and reporters following the story. He noted, "I walked away with a major lesson: you have to look them in the eye." Back then, we had so many different workers coming and going from the property where Nancy lived. A phone call only provides verbal answers from someone who knows how to stay composed. But sitting across the table from someone in person is an entirely different experience. You watch their body language and their physical reactions. You notice the hesitation between a tough question and their response. That reveals the actual person. Sometimes the pressure of a face-to-face meeting forces a reaction that you would never catch over a phone line. A tiny twitch, a beat that drags a fraction too long, or eyes shifting before the words even start. Cole recognized those tells instantly. He just didn't catch it in time back then. Now that hard-earned lesson is being put to use in Tucson's Catalina Foothills. The investigators working the neighborhood aren't just sending out emails to former workers. They are physically showing up, knocking on doors, and sitting across from people in their own kitchens or driveways. They're looking them dead in the eye and asking about their January schedule and any proof they were on that street. Based on the reports from Banfield's Day 60 episode, Cole believes his past experience suggests that when investigators vet every person with access to a property, there is a massive chance they have already crossed paths with the culprit. His name might already be sitting on a notepad somewhere. They likely sat right across from the person who took Nancy Guthrie as part of a massive sweep and simply haven't connected the dots yet. That is the core takeaway from the Woodrum file. Cole is making it clear to anyone listening, the detective who eventually catches a killer has usually already let him walk away once. He's heard the voice and moved on only for digital tracking to bring him right back to the start. Modern tech is the final bridge between a name on a list and a set of handcuffs. That exact investigative logic and technology are being used right now in Tucson by a federal and local task force. The authorities might already know exactly what he looks like, so let's look at where we stand right now on Day 60. Before we dive into how Cole's past applies here, let's be clear, this video is strictly a theory. Everything mentioned today is based on verified reporting and Banfield's inside info, along with updates from Brian Enton and official facts from the local sheriff and the feds. However, the conclusion we're drawing is purely analytical. It's a strong possibility. It's what happens when you apply the Woodrum blueprint to Nancy's disappearance. We aren't saying a suspect has been found yet. We aren't claiming an arrest has happened or that anyone is officially guilty of a crime. We are simply explaining what Day 60 tells us about the current phase of the case and those door-to-door interviews. The authorities are currently tracking down every single builder, every subcontractor, and every laborer who had any reason to be near Nancy Guthrie's home. They're doing it person to person with federal backing. They are in the heavy grind phase of the operation, working out of a major federal facility. According to an inside source, the process is incredibly messy, not because of a lack of skill, but because the list of people with legitimate access to that area is absolutely massive. This is where Clint Cole's experience shows us what is really happening during those interviews in Tucson. Somewhere in that mountain of names, somewhere in a detective's notebook, or among the faces seen during a porch-side chat, is the person who is asked, "Were you working anywhere near this street back in January? Do you have proof of that? Can we take a look at your phone?" Somewhere in that shuffle, there might be a face the feds have already seen without realizing its significance. They might have already sat across from the person who took Nancy Guthrie and heard his excuses. His name might be on the list with a line through it checked off as accounted for before they moved on. If the Woodrum case is indeed the map and the experts on Banfield's show agree it is, then the next step isn't discovering this person for the first time. It's finding the digital link that moves him from a routine check to the center of the investigation. The location data the phone pings, or a cash payment record from a neighbor in the third week of January. That digital footprint has been sitting on a server since the moment he entered that area, just waiting for the right search to flag it in a database. That is the purpose of this grind. It's why Sergeant Cross said this case wouldn't be solved overnight. Banfield's contact called it a total disaster, though not from a lack of organization. The grind is the mess. It is the grueling, systematic elimination of everyone with a valid reason to visit until only the liar remains. He recognized the unlocked entrances, the plant placement, and the exact layout of her secluded back deck. He tracked Nancy's solitary life and routine. That data originated from a specific source. Perhaps a service call or a morning spent watching the house under a guise nobody bothered to challenge. That pretext brought him there twice in January before he finally returned masked and ready to strike. The Bureau understands this too. They are closing in on the person with that specific knowledge. If this pattern persists and the possess case lessons apply to Arizona, as every specialist who has analyzed both situations firmly believes they do, the suspect's name might already be in the files, just waiting for forensic proof to connect. For tips on Nancy Guthrie, call 1-800-CALL-FBI or reach 88-CRIME. The family is offering $1 million for information leading to Nancy's safe return. The total reward pool now reaches approximately $1.2 million. Every minor detail is vital. Every January memory matters. If you spotted a strange car or worker in that area, call now. This video utilizes information from established and verified mainstream news reporting, including the Drop Dead Serious podcast by Ashley Banfield and News Nation plus Fox, NBC, ABC, and Regional Press. No person is currently labeled a suspect. We are discussing analytical theories based on proven investigative methods from similar cases. This channel never identifies or suggests the guilt of any specific private citizen. For official updates, please follow the Pima County Sheriff's Department and the Phoenix FBI. The chilling disappearance of Nancy Guthrie leaves us with a haunting realization. True danger rarely announces itself with a shattered window in the dead of night. Sometimes the greatest threat walks through the front gate in broad daylight, wearing a work shirt and a quiet smile. Our homes are our ultimate sanctuaries, the places where we let our guard down. But this tragic case serves as a heartbreaking reminder that predators often hide in plain sight. They study our routines, map our blind spots, and weaponize our trust. When we open our doors to contractors, handymen, or casual laborers, we are unknowingly giving them the blueprints to our most vulnerable moments. This isn't about living in constant paranoia. It is about reclaiming your safety through vigilant awareness. If you live alone, your daily routine shouldn't be a predictable schedule for someone watching from the shadows. Secure your entryways thoroughly, vet anyone who steps onto your property, and never ignore that quiet whisper of intuition when a situation feels off. We must also watch out for our neighbors. A silent street isn't always a safe street. Protect your sanctuary because your peace of mind and your life is worth defending.